On Builders, I interview executives, entrepreneurs, and leaders about building their business and careers. Today, my guest is Dr. Candace, or Dr. Candace Steele Flippin. She's an author, communications professional, board director, art history buff, and much more. And today we talk about getting your career in shape, which is the title of her latest book. We also discuss her research on Gen Z, accelerating women in leadership. We prop up Gen X and a bunch of other topics. You're going to enjoy this episode. Hi, Dr. Candace. How are you? Great to see you.
Hey, John. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to talk to you today. You're an author, you're a scholar, you're a board director, and you focus much of your time on leadership development for women, creating career paths for all generations, and your latest book, Getting Your Career in Shape, which I'd like to talk to you about. But before we hit on those subjects, I want to dive in a little bit to your origin story.
Oh,
You know, and what was fun to me is looking at your academic history as an undergraduate. It looks like you actually studied art history. I think I have that right. And was pivoting to a business and professional career. Was that intentional, unintentional, or just how life goes?
serendipity. So first, I'm going to say for all of those art historians out there or parents who have children who are studying the humanities, best degrees ever. And as I think about where work is going, a humanities degree is amazing because it teaches you how to think critically. And even though I started my career in the museum space, those early seeds that I learned from my academic training have paid off throughout my career. And I ended up working in life sciences, healthcare, medical devices, financial services, and industrial technology. But the pull through was art history taught me how to look and to listen and to look for patterns and be strategic. So yay, art history.
I was just going to say I can second that emotion. I don't think you'd call my degree humanities per se. It's political science, but similar. People would ask me why, do you want to be a politician? I would say no. I don't want to teach political science either, but it taught me how to think. It taught me in certain ways how certain parts of the world work. Taught me how to think critically, and get into new sort of look at new types of businesses. And it's interesting. Your career is really varied in terms from Abbott to financial services, so many different industries. I imagine it's just looking like at a different period of art history is like examining a new category, new industry.
Yes. What I like to tell people is, your foundation or your base is where you want to start. And that gave me an amazing foundation. And even though I don't work professionally in the arts, I certainly have stayed very close contact as a volunteer, throughout my career. Once I left officially, I served on arts boards. I'm actually on the board of the Woodruff here. As a trustee in Atlanta. I'm a patron of the arts, so still love the arts. So even though I'm not doing it professionally.
Did you know that Builders is sponsored by Business.com? I'd love to tell you about a new free membership from Business.com for small business decision makers. It's called Business.com Plus, and it's designed to address the pain in selecting new products and services. What is the pain, you might ask? It's things like knowing which vendor is best for your specific business, negotiating pricing, having access to someone who can answer questions for you. The new membership, Business.com Plus, handles all of that with a dedicated advisor, pre-negotiated pricing, and solutions tested and reviewed by experts. Check it out at business.com/plus. That's business.com/PLUS. So the transition from art history to getting an MBA, was that right away? Was that after some work experience? What launched your career into becoming a professional?
Serendipity again. So I launched my career working in the arts, and I loved it. I made very little money, but I had a great lifestyle. I think I had 2 part-time jobs. But at that time, we ended up going through a transition in my state. I was living in Michigan, and the funding was cut for the arts. And much like people see fundings now being cut, and the federal funding was contingent on the state match. So when the state made a decision to reallocate those funds, I found myself, like many others in my profession, at a crossroads. And in my case, and please don't judge viewers and listeners, but I was in my 20s, and the head of the museum I worked for came to me and she said, "Candy, don't worry. We have found a way to keep you." And I'm like, "Great." So here's what we're going to do. We're going to expand our camp-in program. So camp-ins are when young people and their chaperones come into a situation, in my case, that museum, on a Friday night. They spend the night. You have programming for them. They bring their camping bags and all that. You sleep on a cot. And then you have some programming in the morning. They have bagels for breakfast and they go on their merry way, being enriched, having fun, all those things. And the executive director said, "We just need you to do 23 of them."
Okay.
Right. So can you imagine someone in their early 20s who liked to believe like she was living her best 20-something-year-old life, spending half the year on a cot at the museum?
On Friday nights, right?
And sometimes Saturday nights. All I saw was like my little bit of a social life that I had, because when you work for museums, you work on the weekends and on holidays. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I will cease to exist. So I opened the newspaper back in the day when you could go to the classifieds. And this is pre when they were doing it on the internet. And I launched a career. So I took my core skills in program management and planning and organizing and managing volunteers and shifted to go work for the American Red Cross, working in volunteer services. So it was really, I'm going to say serendipity, but fear of lack of social life and spending half the year on a cot that caused me to shift. I did have a part-time job where I worked on the weekends for the Detroit Institute of Arts via a contract managing arts programs. So I still kind of had my toe in it, but yeah, that launched me. And from there, I just followed my passions and wanted to really expand and move to corporate. And so my entree was to start doing national campaigns, and I was doing cause-related marketing for a nonprofit. And then I was tapped by a PR firm because at that time, celebrities had just started doing those Ask Your Doctor campaigns. The laws had changed. And so I had the distinct privilege of having done large-scale national cause-related marketing campaigns working with celebrities. And so that was my entree into corporate America. And then from there, my client hired me and I spent a lot of time in life sciences and made the pivot from there.
I love it. And I want to ask a little bit more about your career progression, because as I see it, there are two like really major promotions, I guess, to get to the C-suite. One is the first time that you're elevated to a VP position or a VP plus position. And in your case, what do you believe are some of the keys that got you that first big step?
Intentionality. So when I went to corporate America, I wasn't a vice president in a nonprofit, but in corporate America, it was a different trajectory. And I remember applying for roles and I would always come in second. And I was like, ugh. And while I never lament roles I don't get, I always believe the ones that you get are the ones for you. I did ask a recruiter, I'm like, well, what is it about these other candidates that I don't have? And they said, well, they have built, and in my domain was corporate communications, corporate marketing. And she had said they built a certain type of program, internal communications. And so I thought opportunistically, how can I do something like that in my current role? And at that time, I was the head of communications for the commercial business. And so I went to the chief commercial officer and said, you need your own internal comms department. So I built that. So I had that understanding. And then I just started networking. And what I mean by that is a lot of times I would go to conferences and then I would go from session to session and then I would work in between sessions. But I started going to the peer exchange ones where you just sit at a table and you're just talking about things. And as I was talking to someone, she was having a dilemma and I was just giving advice. I was listening, learning, giving advice. And lo and behold, several months later, I was contacted by a recruiter. And it was an opportunity to build an internal comms program on the other side, because I knew that was the box that I needed to fix. And I applied. And when the recruiter said who the company was, I was like, oh, I know the leader there that I would be reporting to. And I sent her a message. She goes, oh my God, I didn't know you were looking. We need to get you over here. And so I think it was a combination of being intentional about getting the experience, building it where I was as close as I could, and then going on to do that through networking so I could close it. And then as I moved in my career, it has really been networking. The majority of the roles that I've received have come through my network. And so I often advise people, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, no matter where you get your energy, invest some of that energy into other people. Because as you navigate your career, you want to have the widest possible aperture for success by knowing people.
I love your response to a no in that case, and trying to look at things pragmatically and realistically, and saying, what would have had to have been true for me to have gotten that job. Then you check the box and you put yourself in an amazing situation. I wonder if those things, networking, intentionality, are part of the ways that you get your career in shape, which is the title of your most recent book. And I hope you don't mind if I ask you to show it to the audience. But
I happen to have a copy right here.
Wow. Oh my gosh. What a coincidence. But probably to use an intentionality, there had to be some intentionality with using that phrase in shape, because I think it evokes for me, like getting in shape, like exercise, or getting your body in shape. So why did you decide to use that phrase for your career?
My domain expertise is corporate marketing and corporate communications. And so as I was doing the research, a number of themes started to come up. And so one of the themes, I just tried to match a letter to the theme. And as I was looking at them, trying to put them together, shape emerged, and it just made sense. And the other thing is, I would often tell people careers are journeys, and the best trips are with someone by your side. And then I would often tell people when they would talk to me, whether I was mentoring people, I would say, it's a new year, it's time to get in shape. And so it just kind of all came together, and it's easy to remember, and it's fun. I like to think it's catchy. And the last thing I'll say is, we as humans don't always like change. And so, but we like to prepare sometimes. And so I figured it was an easy way to get people to think about moving their career along.
Also, what I found in my own career, and the people who I've seen be most successful in their careers, is they invest, and you get a payoff. Like in exercise, you don't go for one run and you're in shape. You have to work up to it. And then all of a sudden, 2, 3, 6 months, you're ready for the next job, or you've overcome something that's holding you back, or whatever. Maybe you could tell the audience, a personal story, maybe from the book, or a story from someone that you researched that would help, a way that they got their career in shape, or at least one of the lessons from the book.
Oh my. Okay. So I'll start with myself. I'll start with the first one. I've been very fortunate, extremely blessed. And a lot of people think kind of like I woke up in my career like this, but I actually was a financial shipwreck in my 20s. I remember going to college, and there would be these fairs, and it would just be rows of banks lined up giving you credit cards. And you fill out this little card, like a postcard, and then miraculously 3 weeks later, the credit card comes in the mail. I'm like, I'll take this one. I'll take this one. And so I graduated with my degree and a ton of credit card debt. And it took me a long time to dig out from under that. And so the first thing I had to learn was how to be better with my finances. And so the acronym, the first one is S. It's about building a strong financial foundation. It's around save. And I talk about, I did save, but I didn't realize how important your financial foundation, your savings is to your ability to have a really great career trajectory. Certainly things can happen. You can get lucky. But in my case, at that time, a dream job emerged. And it was heading up an organization that helped people, young people vote. And it was up my alley. It was working with MTV back then. It was working with celebrities. It was doing cause related marketing. It was doing education, all the things I had done in my career. And I had just bought my first home, which I had stretched to get into. And I was in my late 20s. And the offer came in and it was a little less than what I was making. And I did not have a strong financial foundation. So I was not able to take that job despite my negotiation skills because I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to take the risk. And it was one of the first rude awakenings for me as it relates to how your level of savings and the way you're managing your money and understanding how money works can impact your career. And so I had to get my own career in shape early on. And it was a challenge to change how I looked at my relationship with money and how I looked at it as it relates to my career. So I'll stop there because there's a part two to that story.
Okay. I want to hear part two. In my early 20s where, I had a credit card and I'd pay down the minimum payment and that's what I had to spend that month, above and beyond what I got. And you're right. Looking back at that, maybe there's another job you want, but you don't even bother looking for it because you're sort of focused on next paycheck, etc. So important. Okay. Is part two a turnaround or
Yes. So
okay.
remember I told you how I pivoted in my career to a role to get to VP. So, that opportunity came, but it came with $20,000 less than what I was making. Right. That was kind of what my husband said when I told him. And so I said to myself, you need this piece because with this piece, you're going to gain all these things and then you can pivot. And so I did it. And the other part of my book, which is the acronym for Advocate, which is learning to use your voice effectively. And it also includes, working on your negotiation skills. During my negotiations, I knew that I couldn't change the salary because companies have salary bands. They really don't like to mess with those, but they can be discretionary with other things like your signing bonus. They can sometimes the bonus, it could be discretionary. So I sat down with the recruiter and I said, listen, I know I'm going to excel in this role. And I have looked at the net present value over the next 3 years of what this will look like based on what I'm giving up for this opportunity. We need to come up with a strategy that will make me whole. And I said, and so if the salary's here, fine. Let's look at the sign-on bonus and then let's look at what the annual bonus target will be so that I will stay on the same trajectory. And then I sent him the Excel spreadsheet that showed what my expectations needed to be. He was like, whoa. And I think it impressed the other side so much. I got the high end that I could with what was in their pay scale, but then I opened the opportunity for myself. So even though my base was lower, I was getting more cash up front. And so in the end, I actually helped negotiate a better salary situation for myself.
Wow. And being data driven, being thoughtful, having a reason. So many people don't do that when they're, talking to me or talking to my peers about salary and moving up. And that's the type of thing that let's say you're a middle manager and you need to get approval for something. That's the type of thing that you can maybe get approved when someone comes to you and is thoughtful like that. A bunch of these stories are about your early career, and you've done a lot of work, wrote a book about people who are early in their career right now, Gen Z, and sort of giving them a career path. I guess my first question is, are there misconceptions about Gen Z from older generations like myself? Just sort of a blanket statement. Do I presume things about Gen Z that are not true or might not be true?
You would never, John. Just never.
Well, here's the reason I ask, because I sort of buried the lead, but when I was young, there was the Time magazine article that came out that said Gen X, the slacker generation. That was like a famous title, and it labeled me and everybody my age as people who didn't give a hoot about anything. So I wonder if, and obviously that's not that did not turn out to be true. Are there similar things?
Yes, I'm a Gen X as well. I like to say that we're like the Jan
Brady?
The Jan Brady of the generation discussion. Everyone's talking about Marsha,
right,
which is like the millennials, the baby boomers, but no one ever talks about us.
Right.
So here's what I found in my research, and that book actually came out in 2017, and I feel privileged to be among the first to really document Gen Z workplace values and career values. So there was this perception that because of, they were digital natives and they weren't playing outside, like all those things that we heard, but that perhaps that they were lazy, they wanted shortcuts.
Mm-hmm.
So their efficiency and their digital orientation was perceived as them being lazy. They were perceived as not believing in the American dream and wanting to work hard and all those other things. And I did not find that true in my research. And I continue to see things very differently. So it's really looking at it through a lens of how you came up. Generation theory says that when and where you were born and what was happening where you live shape your values. That's why we hear sometimes people in the silent generation or the traditionalists and even some of the baby boomers have different workplace values, because the traditionalists, people who grew up during the Great Depression where things were scarce, they're perceived as not wanting to be wasteful. Baby boomers, when they entered the workplace, there was a greater expectation that you could spend your career with one company. You retire 25 years later, 30 with your watch and your pension or defined benefit program, blah, blah, blah. Well, these millennial and Gen Z particularly, these cohorts of, I say, workers, young people, younger people, humans, think about what was happening when they were coming of age. And I talk about the expectation around effort, which sometimes get classified as less effort or laziness, is just what play looked like and what the expectations of play. So for example, we played outside and there were winners and losers, and you dusted yourself off and you did it the next time, right? I think that we did have this video game. It was like 2 lines and a little ball, and then you had to move it. And then you went to the arcade to do Miss Pac-Man or Pac-Man, like all of that. But at the end, you lost. And if you wanted to do again, you quarters, whatever. But that accelerated. So for young people, play is you master something one time, you get to the next level. And, I told you before we started, I was traveling yesterday, and in the row across from me was a little boy, and he was playing a game. I don't even think he was 6. So imagine you master something and you go to the next level. So in your mind, temporally, you're thinking that achievement and advancement is not based on how many times you do it. It's just the time you do it, and then you go to the next. And what I've seen play out in my interviews, or young people will say, or millennial, but Gen Z particularly, they'll say, I don't understand why it's taking years for me to get this promotion. Like, I went through the year, I did all these things. I've proved I can do it. I'm ready to go to the next thing. Why do I have to keep showing over and over again for some unclear, indeterminate amount of time before I'm ready to move on. Whereas I'll talk to Gen X's or baby boomers and like, I don't understand how these young people feel like they can just come in and get my job in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
They need to sit in that seat and pay their dues. And then millennial in the center, they're like, why do we have to be hazed? Like Gen X, and maybe when you remember how frustrating it is, why haven't you fixed the system? And so I feel like sometimes that efficiency that these digital natives have learned, like, they'll say, well, why do we have to have this 2-hour meeting? You could just send an email or a Slack message or something, and we're done and keep it moving. And so I see that play out a lot. And it's just how work has changed, how life has changed. And we are slower to evolve our thinking around that or understanding around it.
So for folks who are in Gen X and like say leadership positions and have a large Gen Z workforce, what would you recommend to folks of our generation to to improve our business and get the most of everyone that works at the company?
3 things. So the first is there's this expectation or perception, I should say, that generations don't matter. And every time I ask baby boomers through Gen Z, is it important that your manager know about generational differences? By and large, everyone says yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's important. It's important that my manager take time and improves performance. It improves communication. Maybe not for everyone, but by and large, the majority of people say yes. So it's not always just life stage, it's identity and understanding and appreciating that. And just like any type of human dynamics at a large scale, there's going to be a bell curve. There are going to be people who are in the center and they are more common, and they're going to be outliers. So I feel that it doesn't disrespect the outliers to just be respectful and note that when and where someone was born and what was happening shapes what's important to them. So that's one, be open, have a growth mindset, be open to learning that some people may have different expectations based on their generational cohort. Number 2 is even within that, I've found also through my research that there's certain communication styles that different generations focus on. And so I looked at some work by a scholar out of the UK, and Orrin Hargay, he looks at interpersonal communications. And that's just the way we exchange information and ideas, both verbally, like I'm talking to you, or non-verbally, like if I say, do you like something? And you shake your head. Yeah. And I'm thinking, oh, she likes it. Or if you do a thumbs down,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, they don't like that. So,
right.
Interpersonal communications. And I looked at his 12 and I did a study of 1,400 individuals. I've done it multiple times. And I was looking for 4, one for each generation. And I was going to train people, learn these 4 interpersonal skills and you'll be golden. Turns out there are 3. So the first one is active listening. That's paying attention to someone, giving them eye contact, not using your device or looking away or multitasking when you're in a conversation. And baby boomers resonate toward that. And I think part of it is how communication flowed when they were coming of age. So active listening, everyone will benefit from that. The second one for our generation, the Gen X, yay, Gen X, I try to prop us up anytime I can.
Thank you. We need it.
Is collaboration. And that's because, particularly when we came to workplace, globalization started opening up. People were working across borders, across state lines. Technology enabled that. And along with that, we started adopting really great practices around everything that goes in collaboration, keeping people informed, recognizing. Some people say we over-recognize millennials. Feedback loops, like all the things that make reward systems, everything that makes collaboration great. And so for Gen X's, it's really around enhancing your collaboration skills. That's good for everyone. Interestingly, for both millennial and Gen Z, it was empathy. Now, some people say empathy is putting yourself into someone else's shoes. And I feel like that narrows it because I can't imagine my husband walking around in my stilettos comfortably. So what I like to say is being open to accepting someone else's perspective as valid for them, even if you disagree. And so much great work has gone into mental health awareness and human dynamics. And so we've done such a great job with that. These younger cohorts are much more open to being able to express themselves and to be in tune and recognizing what's happening with their environment and how it manifests for them. And so there's a lot more effort into empathy, and a lot of management scholars are now looking at that, and it's paying off. Now, some people will look at it in a negative way, but imagine a more humanistic approach to work and communicating with one another. So, asking about how are you feeling and being okay with that, which is a stretch for some generations. Like, I don't recall when I started my career, even with great managers, being able to express that part of me. But we see that now, and the opposite spectrum of that is the action they put behind when they don't think things are right. Like, you've seen
Totally.
like workers walking off the job because the company took an action that they did not approve of.
Right.
Publicly traded companies. And so what I say to leaders is, this is important. The way it plays out is a much more humanistic, individualized approach to work and management techniques. So making sure that you're not disparaging someone else's perspective or point of view because it's different than your own. I was speaking to a group last month, and someone said, well, can you give me like a real world application? And so I talked about, I've worked with a lot of associations and membership organizations. And in this case, the Gen X's, we were struggling with the millennials, John. And so I did a study, and for this one, I was doing a lot of interviews. And the critical issue that they had talked about was people coming to work.
Like the time of day, or if they come in at all, or work remote.
Come in at all. And so I had never done a study like this, but I was looking at reasons why you wouldn't show up to work without advance notice. And so I looked at baby boomers, millennials, Gen X, and Gen Z. And so one, you would say, you're not feeling well, you're sick, right? That was pretty consistent across. Same ratio of people not coming. I mean, that makes sense. Your child is sick. And I'm not going to talk about the gender differences, but just the cohort. We saw more millennial and Gen Z saying, well, if your child's sick, yeah. But then I asked, your pet is sick.
Mm-hmm.
You're having a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
The commute is too long.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this higher number in those younger cohorts, millennial and Gen Z, like, no, I'm opting out. And so now I'm going to the interview part. I'm asking, and by and large, the comment was something like, well, yeah, why would I get in the, I checked ahead. There's a traffic jam. I'm just not going to go in. So if they could have the work from home option, they said work from home, but stress, that's just too much stress. And then one person said, why would I work? I'm sick. Like what would you expect? And so all this great work that has gone into wellness and mental health has really landed on these generations. And if you kind of, history will tell us, if we look at large population samples 20 years from now, if they're ultimately healthier and if we see long-term health effects. But from a stress perspective and mental health, they're guarding it in a way that perhaps the Gen X and baby boomers didn't. We sucked it up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So someone will say, well, okay, well, how does that help me run a business? And what I will say is, if you're paying for healthcare overall, you probably want healthier workers, right? And people who are focused on that. But if you are using technology as an enabler, what I found is they didn't mind like kind of checking emails and keeping things moving, like using technology as an enabler. That seemed to work. And then they didn't also mind sacrificing if they knew they had the flexibility. So they may say, you know what? I'm going to go in a little bit later. So I'll work online in the morning and then I'll go in. or I'll make it up some other kind of way. And so the pull through that I say to leaders is actually flexibility. Flexibility in how you use technology to get people to perform.
I kind of want to bring this all together with a personal anecdote, and that's someone had slacked me and sort of asked me to take a look at something, and they're from a different generation. I said, "Oh, I can't get to it today," but I didn't exactly say it like that. I can't exactly remember how I said it, but that person then over Slack did a wellness check with me, feeling like I might have come across as saying I'm too stressed to do it, or I have other stuff going on. And even though that's not what I meant, I really appreciated them checking in with me, and I felt cared for, and it helped me learn something about how different generations see something. And then maybe on a lighter note, my son comes in and asked me a couple of weeks ago, is mom mad at me? And I said, what do you mean? And he shows me her text. And the fact that she had used punctuation seemed to indicate to him that she was. And I said, no, she's not mad. But he goes, well, I use punctuation with my friends. We use punctuation when we're angry with each other. And I said, all right. That's lesson learned for me. Before we log off here, I want to ask you, accelerating leadership for women is a big part of what you do. And I'll end with sort of like a I guess a two-part broad question. So looking back at the last decade or so, do you think things have gotten better for accelerating leadership for women? In what ways? And where do you think the biggest next step is for hopefully making this a non-issue?
So if I kind of overall, yes, and but. So in the year 2020, when I did my TED Talk, a lot of scholars were calling it the year of the woman. Women had reached pay parity in a lot of professions. And interestingly, women had outpaced men in the non-farm labor market in the workplace. And so all signs were women were on the way up. And then COVID happened. And we saw these record numbers of women being displaced in the workplace. And there were a lot of scholars who were saying that women will never regain ground, right, globally, because of exits from work, displacement, family obligations, and it went on for so long. And so where we are now, and what I think is great, is we are seeing more pay transparency, which allows women to have better opportunity in terms of pay parity. But we are seeing a lot of displacement for women in the workplace. And so I feel that what will be helpful is the continued great work around transparency, the continued efforts that a lot of companies are making by looking at their workplaces and making sure that that there's a level playing field for anyone to be able to pursue an opportunity and perform in their culture, and a recognition that things are different for different genders. And how do you put programs together that don't make people feel less than or not eligible, but at the same time elevate people so they feel that the possibility is there for them. And that's what I'm hopeful for. And then just people like me who are very intentional about helping women get to the careers that they need, the ones they want, and certainly the ones that they deserve.
I really appreciate our conversation today. Thanks so much for joining me on the pod.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate you.
Did you know that more than 20 million professionals and business owners visit business.com and Business News Daily? Why? It's the best place for resources, advice, and information about how to grow your business. And if your goal is to reach our audience, you should become one of our lead partners, sponsor a section of the site, or sponsor even this podcast. Reach us at business.com/connect. That's business.com/connect.